Gaming Standard Association conversations. The IGSA conversations are just that. They're conversations between various group of industry professionals discussing a specific topic. They are intended to be informative and to generate questions. I'm Peter de Raad, IGSA's president, and today we have with us Ethan Tower, the technical director at IGSA. Hi, Ethan.
Hey, Peter.
Today's conversation topic is an introduction to one of GSA's reporting standard, which can be of significant value to both the regulator and the supplier. And it's called the Regulatory Reporting Interface, or the RRI standard. GSA will also be hosting a 1-hour Zoom session with Q&A on how IGSA standards make data reporting more efficient. But today, let's talk about the Regulatory Reporting Interface, the efficiency gains. Hi, Ethan. In a previous conversation, Mark Pace and I talked about how the Regulatory Reporting Interface, or RRI as we know it, helped consolidate reporting across gaming verticals, and also how it created efficiencies for both the suppliers and the regulators. And today I'd like to explore how exactly RRI does that.
Yeah, okay. Well, RRIs turn out to be a great standard, Peter. There's lots of great functionality that's gone into it.
Indeed. So can you give us a glimpse under the hood, so to speak, Ethan?
Sure. And I'll try to skip over the things that you and Mark already talked about, things like the frequency of data reporting, selection of data elements, ordering of data, things like that. Okay. I'll get into more of how it works rather than what it does.
Oh, perfect.
So RRI was developed to help regulators provide oversight in a more efficient and economic manner. It provides access to the data that regulators need to do many common tasks, like balancing player accounts, calculating taxable revenues, verifying game performance, balancing jackpots, things like that. And it focuses on the content and format of the data. It doesn't specify how the data is transmitted to the regulators or how the regulators secure it and store it. There are various computer industry standards that can be used for that, things like HTTP and FTP.
So if a regulator wants to store the data in some sort of local database or vault, they're free to do that?
Right. Once the data gets to the regulator systems, they can do whatever they want with it. This makes it easy for them to use off-the-shelf products to store it and then also analyze the data.
Yeah, that's got to be positive for the regulators.
It is. Another thing that RRI does is provide support for multiple jurisdictions and currencies. In theory, it can be used to collect information from systems serving multiple different jurisdictions. Players on those systems might be using different currencies. RRI also supports network games. Those are the games that where players are competing against each other, like poker. Those players could be logged on to different casinos, possibly in different jurisdictions.
Well, that sounds pretty focused on the online gaming vertical.
Well, that's where RRI started, but you have to remember that online means more than just things like casino games and poker. It also means lotteries, sports betting happens online. Both of those activities are available in brick and mortar side as well. So RRI supports all types of gaming activity, whether it's online or land-based or even cross-vertical.
That makes sense.
Yeah. When you look under the covers at RRI, it's organized by the roles that systems play. A system could be responsible for player registration, funds management, gameplay, or even jackpot management. Or it could be responsible for more than one of those functions, like both player registration and funds management. The systems report the data they're responsible for, and they use data formats that have been specifically created for that purpose. RRI is also flexible and extensible. It can support many different revenue reporting and taxation models. As the industry evolves, new game categories, new types of transactions, and new data elements can be easily added to the standard.
So it sounds like the RRI standard is future-proof.
Yeah, and its ability to support new types of gaming activity as we go forward.
So how does RRI go about doing that, Ethan?
Well, a lot of data is transactional, and a lot of that data is related to money. So RRI uses a double entry accounting model as the way of tracking how money moves through the systems. In almost every case, there's a debit and a credit. If a player makes a wager, there's a debit to their wallet. And also at the same time, a credit to the game they're playing. A new type of transaction is simply a new type of debit or credit. It fits right into the model.
So why did you say almost every case? Why not every case? You said almost every case.
Well, there's some transactions that are one way. That's one way into the gaming ecosystem or one way out. For example, when a player transfers money from a bank to their wallet, there's a credit to their wallet, but there's nothing in the gaming ecosystem to debit. It's coming from outside the ecosystem.
All right.
The debit is to the player's bank account.
Yeah.
It's outside the gaming ecosystem.
I get it. All right.
Yeah, and the model works well for online transactions, but there are some land-based activities that don't really fit the model. So RRI supports traditional reporting models as well. Those models handle the legacy reporting used with table games and slots, meter models.
But I would imagine that's not the only difference between the reporting for online games and land-based gaming.
Sure, there are other legacy requirements that we have to deal with, like event reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, regulators wanted to receive reports when certain security events happened on slot machines, like door opens.
So the RRI standard accounts for those scenarios as well.
Correct. And another real nice thing about RRI is data consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Within the gaming ecosystem, total debits always equal total credits. Data can be cross-checked from one period to the next. Real-time data will match near real-time data, and then the near real-time data will match the periodic data.
So the standard preserves the data integrity across the reporting timeframes, right?
Yeah, and obviously there's a difference between how real-time data is reported versus near real-time or periodic. The near real-time and periodic reports are static. They're posted at fixed intervals.
Yep.
Real-time reports use a request response mechanism. So there's an ongoing connection between the supplier system and the regulator system. But the data is always consistent across timeframes and across the reports.
All right, understood. But during the conversation with Mark, Ethan, he also mentioned that RRI is using XML. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. XML is an extensible markup language. The committee decided to use XML because it's a widely used data reporting standard. XML schemas are provided with RRI to make it easier for the developers to get started. We also wanted the standard to be extensible so that regulators could add new enumerations, attributes, sub-elements to address jurisdiction-specific requirements. As long as they don't remove any of the required parts, the extended version will still conform to the standard. And to avoid conflicts, if people start adding lots of new things, the extensions are always put in unique XML namespaces. Each XML namespace has its own unique prefix that identifies the extension. That way, the extensions are easily identifiable and trackable.
So I see how that provides the regulators with a lot of flexibility. Huh?
Yeah, it does. It makes it easy for the suppliers to identify and deal with the unique jurisdictional requirements that they run into.
All right, so Ethan, now that you explained a bit of the background, can you help our audience understand where the reporting efficiency gains actually come in?
Well, efficiency can be gained in a lot of areas. And one thing we wanted to make sure of was that it benefited both suppliers and regulators. Mm-hmm. So for suppliers, RRI provides a single reporting standard that can be used across multiple jurisdictions. So it helps minimize the amount of customization that's required per jurisdiction, and it can help remove some of the barriers to entry for those jurisdictions. And for regulators, it really helps minimize the need to develop jurisdiction-specific requirements. They can just use RRI. It allows regulators to use off-the-shelf solutions for common reporting tasks, and it can also facilitate information sharing across jurisdictions when it's needed.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah, and we think that operators will get a win too. We think that RRI will help lower acquisition costs and ongoing compliance costs for the operators, not to mention reducing time to market for new products.
Ethan, this sounds great. I think we got a peek into the RRI without getting too deep into technology.
Well, we can dig deeper if you want to.
Well, perhaps that's best left to a one-on-one conversation with interested parties. But in the meantime, let me try and summarize this conversation, Ethan. RRI standardizes how data is reported depending on the role a system has within the gaming ecosystem. RI also handles gaming transactions using primarily a double entry accounting system, but also supports alternative systems for certain game categories. RI uses XML and XSD to specify the data elements that will be reported and the order. But it's extensible, meaning that a gaming jurisdiction can add its own enumerations, attributes, and sub-elements. They can also change the order in which the data is reported. And lastly, this is done through uniquely named XML namespaces, which are like instructions for the supplier system. The end result is that regulators get lots of flexibility, but the suppliers don't have to modify their system. Was that everything?
Yep. Hopefully at the end of the day, RRI will provide benefits to suppliers, regulators, and those operators.
Indeed it does, Ethan. Thank you. This was a great conversation. To our audience, thank you for listening. Please send us your questions and comments by contacting us. Information on doing so can be found at our website at igsa.org. Until the next conversation, thank you.